Hello, hi Geshe. Hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay, we can wait 1 minute before we
Sure.
start.
Let's wait for a moment. Yeah, I'm a little early. Okay.
Hello, hi Geshe. Hello
Hi.
everyone. Okay, so I will start by reminding everyone. We have the WhatsApp group that you can join to get notifications. And also, if you have questions regarding the class that you want to pass to Geshe, you can send it to me by email or by phone. I posted them here in the chat. Also, if you want to join the WhatsApp group, you can contact me using it. Um, and also, I want to remind everyone the classes here are all done voluntary, and you can contribute to making this thing happen and to practice generosity also. So you have in the chat also the link for the PayPal you can use. You can also find all this information in the website of Dharma Friends of Israel. So thank you everyone for joining, and of course thank you very much Geshe for teaching me.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you, Shir. Um, let's start setting the motivation. So we'll take a few moments just focusing on the breath, doing mindfulness meditation on breathing. And then, in order to generate the right kind of motivation, first visualize the Buddha in the space in front of you, appearing in the form of a fully ordained monk as a manifestation of all the great enlightened qualities that we ourselves can attain one day. Seated in a full lotus position, an open lotus, a sun disk and a moon disk. Passionately smiling at us. Being inseparable from our personal Lama. And surrounding the Buddha are all the great masters of India and Tibet. And again, they're inseparable from your personal Lama. And then think that surrounding this visualization in the space in front of you and surrounding yourself are all sentient beings, quietly sitting all around us, with all their different types of suffering, mental and physical. And then generate the thought, I'm just like these sentient beings. Just like them, I want to be happy. I don't want to suffer. My well-being is dependent on all these sentient beings, even if just indirectly. So generate a sense of closeness and acceptance of these beings, together with a wish, may they be free from all their unwanted sufferings and the causes that gave rise to all their problems and their limitations. And may I be able to free them from all those. And then generate a strong determination. I will do all I can to help sentient beings to free themselves from all their suffering and the causes of their suffering. However long it may take. And since I can be most effective in my pursuit to benefit sentient beings when I become a Buddha myself, so therefore generate the determination I will become a Buddha for the welfare of all these sentient beings. With this motivation, I will learn about Chandrakirti's entry into the middle way. And then let's keep this motivation without letting go of it and recite the prayers together. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And the four immeasurables. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And then the following, directed at the Buddha and the great Indian and Tibetan masters and other masters. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time. And rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence. And turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of others to the great enlightenment. All right, okay. So let's get right away to this week's assignment, if you like. This week's assignment is a little different in the sense that compassion, of course, is still the center of it. And of course, compassion, well, being the basis for a wish to attain enlightenment for all sentient beings. But I'd like to be the focus on yourself in the sense of generating what's called self-compassion. And the reason I come up with this now, it's been something that's on my mind for a while now. However, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and I guess also in the other Buddhist traditions, the ancient traditions, the concept of self-compassion is not emphasized a lot. In Tibetan, in fact, you can make a word, you can create a word using the traditional, the usual word for compassion and add a self to it, but it's a really weird word. And I came across something today on the BBC. They have an article called Self-Compassion by some guy. You can read it. It's still there. It's been there for 4 days, apparently. So It's on self-compassion versus self-esteem. And one part of it, your homework will be, it's about this lady called Dr. Christine Neff. You may have heard of her. It turns out she's got a Buddhist background. But besides that, I think she's a psychologist. Oh, I forget her background. And she did a TED Talk. It's only 20 minutes. So one of your assignments is to watch the TED Talk, to check it out online. Her name is Dr. Christine with a K, Kristin, and her last name is Neff, Neff. So Christine Neff, a TED Talk on self-compassion. It's not hard to find. I tried to find a link, but it didn't work out. However, I found her video online, and it's like 19 minutes, something like that. And it tells you a lot about self-compassion. It's really beautiful. And so I've thought about self-compassion this afternoon, why it doesn't exist, why is it not put forth in the Tibetan tradition? And well, that's pretty easy to answer. The reason is that Tibetans have the self-compassion. They have this type of mind automatically. I mean, they are very accepting of their own faults, their own failure, and they can easily move on when things go wrong. On top of that, and this lady, Kristin Neff, she talks about self-esteem versus self-compassion, that self-esteem doesn't have the same qualities of self-compassion. And I noticed that the way she describes self-esteem, that may be the Western way it is described, but it's very different to the Tibetan way, to the Buddhist, well, Tibetan Buddhist way. I don't know of other Buddhist traditions, but I guess it's the same. Self-confidence is quite different. The way she puts it, and you'll hear it in the TED Talk, and maybe online you can also read it, where you can only feel good about yourself in comparison to other people, and that may lead you to look down on other people, maybe even bully other people, give them the fault in certain situations. And so anyway, it's very detailed. She does a great job explaining it. But my understanding of self-esteem, based on what I learned in the Tibetan tradition, is quite different. It is actually strongly connected to self-compassion in the sense, and here the author puts it really nicely, think of the kindest friend you have. We all probably know someone, possibly a friend, who is unconditionally kind and compassionate when it comes to us. This kind of friend you have to be to yourself. As in, okay, things go wrong, you make a mistake. And in this BBC article, it starts beautifully, like starting off, well, we all know what it feels like when we failed or we made an important mistake. We may still blush with shame and scold ourselves for having been so stupid or selfish. And what came to mind was, well, in general, this is true in our daily life. And then when we come to Buddhism, so previously being angry, being attached, having these negative emotions, it wasn't such a big deal because, well, it's very typical to the Buddhist tradition that these are emphasized as being negative, but not emphasized to the same degree in the West. And so on top of all the failure we encounter in our daily life, now we got the Buddhist failure. I was too selfish. I was self-centered. I was so attached. I was envious. I was arrogant. The list is endless, negative emotions. So we beat ourselves up and feel bad about it. And possibly in certain situations, it just talks about blaming others, etc. But even without going into all these details, so it's actually possibly, especially in the beginning, that this is added, this kind of self-loathing, because we can't be proper Buddhist practitioners or whatever it is. And so the Tibetans don't talk about it as in like describing it, because they live it. And I feel like I've been very fortunate to have been around Tibetans who actually showed me, my classmates, the nuns I've lived with or I live with, who are very resilient in that, yes, things go wrong, they make mistakes, they say, oh, bummer, that was wrong, and they move on. Okay, I made a mistake. How can they do it differently? There's no holding on to it. Self-forgiveness. Okay, of course, I made a mistake. I'm just a human being. There's room for improvement. So what can I do differently next time? That's it. Just move on. And that form of self-compassion, that's how she describes so beautifully. But I think we need this description to first identify within ourselves whether we're lacking this kind of compassion or not. And she does a great job. So please listen to this. And for this entire week, when you notice you make a mistake, generate this feeling of it's okay, it's all right, I'm just human, I make mistakes. Until I become a Buddha, I'll make mistakes. And this feeling of inner acceptance and compassion, in the sense, a feeling of acceptance. So when we say affection and closeness, in that, an acceptance of our failure and the wish to be free from this suffering that comes along with this failure, and saying, I'll just let it go. It's all right. It's okay. I'll make mistakes. I can learn from my mistakes. So, not to beat ourselves up. So, if you notice that, if that's something you tend to do, well, that should be your focus this week. And once you're able to generate that feeling of warmth, like you're your best friend, like you treat yourself as this kind and compassionate friend, and then extend that compassion also out towards others. Again, in the same way as you've done before. But please check first. Please check. Do you beat yourself up about making mistakes, about not being efficient enough, especially when it comes to Dharma practice, but also as parents, as brothers, as sisters, as daughters and sons, and so forth. All right, that's for this week, self-compassion, and watch the video. And there's a whole book on it anyway. So if you have interest, you won't forget the title. It's called Self-Compassion. It's nicely written. I looked at it, I found it online. It's called, quite nicely written and easily understood, not technical, etc. So that's your job for this week. But of course, this emotional aspect that we're so interested in, love, compassion, that we continuously, and this morning as Holiness did such a beautiful job once again, talking about these aspects, they should not be separate from our understanding of reality, where this text we're studying comes in. And we've just reached the true truth. And I've got some of your questions, important questions. If we could go to the text, we reached we got to verse 22. But before we go into those two truths, I'd like to answer, this is still as part of questions I've received. So I keep receiving kind of long questions from someone, very good questions. It takes me a while to read through them, and I'm not sure I always answer them correctly. So the person should just hang in there and maybe send follow-up questions. And then also from other people. And so what I received is, well, one part I'd like to talk about is still this: what does it mean to be conventionally existent? What does it mean, this idea of the monster? I've got the phone right next to me here, so I got it right there. How do we, so one question is, if there is a monster, how can we know when something that is real to us is actually valid, and when do we know it's not valid? So within just this sphere of conventional reality, as in like what we assume to be true, how do we know, how can we check something is actually true? It's actually, well, actually true in the sense it exists. How can we check that it exists versus knowing it's just a fantasy? Remember last time we talked about this monster. If a group of people decides, well, there's this monster and it eats us up from within, does that mean it's conventionally true? This is it's conventionally the case that this monster exists conventionally. And this other person wrote, for instance, just trying to find a right question. For instance, the more an idea catches on and the more people behave as if it really was such a thing, the stronger the effect becomes. Simply by the actions of the believers, it becomes such and such. No, that's not enough. That is not enough. Now, depending on what it is, and I've already mentioned it last time. For instance, with the monster. Well, let me just give you the technical explanation. For something to be conventionally existent, so to be valid, to be conventionally existent, it should not be contradicted by a conventional valid cognizer and a convention and an ultimate valid cognizer. In other words, a mind, first of all, for something to be conventionally existed, it cannot be contradicted by a mind that realizes emptiness. Okay, so in other words, if I believe things to exist inherently, that well, that's not conventionally valid. Why? Because it can be contradicted by the mind that understands things don't exist inherently. All right. Now, when it's not to do with emptiness, when it just comes to the monster I just described, well, how do I know this is not valid? Well, maybe it is valid. Maybe there is a monster. Excuse me. Maybe there is a monster and that monster is eating us up from within. Well, then I need to use a valid cognizer that checks, is there something that eats up my inner organs or what have you? So it would be a matter of checking, is this really happening? Or when I, for instance, believe that there's a snake over there. So to take the Buddhist example, there's a snake over there. Like a group of people believe there's a snake in that corner. Well, is that conventionally valid? The way to check whether it's conventionally valid is to see, does this object have all the aspects, all the characteristics that that we usually assume, that we usually accept a snake to have. So does it look in a certain way? Does it behave in a certain way? If it's a poisonous snake, could it possibly bite us, etc.? And that way, it's a conventional. It does not deal with the emptiness, just with conventional phenomena, the appearances around us. And we check if it's a snake, that's what a snake means, because we apply a name to something based on a certain definition, certain characteristics. So definition just means unique characteristics. And if I find these characteristics of a snake to be there, then I can say it exists conventionally. But if they're not there, then it's in contradiction to a conventional, valid mind that verifies that there are these characteristics. If I can't find them, well, it's not there. The same for the monster. Well, we need to verify, what does it mean, a monster that eats us within? Taking the example of the monster. Well, it's a living being. It's a sentient being. It eats us within. Well, let's check. Let's have an x-ray. Let's have a whatever you do to find out whether someone is nibbling away at your organs. So let's check whether that's in accordance. That's verify. That's what it means. Now, the question, what is an extra difficulty, is how a conventional reality can change without the object changing as drastically as our perception of the object. Now, this is with regard to, for instance, the value of something. This is not with regard to the whole entity. If you take gold, for instance, now, that was the example, one of the question I also gave with regard to gold, as in like, we decided to give gold a certain value. Does that make it true? Is it conventionally, does it have that value? Yes, with regard to a value, that is true. A value is much more something that is relative to society we live in. Whether it's gold or not, that is not, it's less dependent on that. I'm not talking about labeling. I'm just saying it's what we call gold is a metal with a certain molecular structure. And unless that changes, we can continuously call it gold, because this is what, as a convention, gold is said to be. It has a certain color, a certain shape, and going deeper with regard to its molecular structure, well, this is its structure, and based on that, I call it gold. That is one aspect, calling it gold, calling it a metal. And that doesn't just randomly change all the time. But the value, in the sense you could say that is more relative to, well, what people like, what people dislike. There are many different factors that determine the value of gold, for instance. So, in the same way as gold is not intrinsic in the metal, in this metal we call gold, cannot be found in there. It is merely labeled on the basis of certain atoms, molecules, and so forth, and certain other characteristics. Likewise, its value is also merely labeled. However, as I said last time, there's a certain basis of imputation that it's rare, for instance. It has to have certain qualities that make it valuable. Its rarity, for instance. Like I said last time, it cannot be just found on the side of the road. Otherwise, everyone would have lots of gold, and where would its value come from? So this is, again, there are certain characteristics gold must have, and based on that, we label it valuable. Now, there is a basis of imputation, and we're not just making it up. That's important. Is there this base? Is there a basic function? Okay, and that is determined by a valid mind that verifies these characteristics. So when we label things, we don't just label randomly. We don't call one thing cow one day and the next day we call it elephant. No, there is some consistency to it. There's an order to it. There's a structure to it that, based on certain characteristics and functions that this object performs, based on that, I call this elephant, valuable, whatever characteristics I'm labeling here, what are the objects I'm labeling. In all these cases, there's always a basis based upon which I label it. And if that basis is not given, then that can be verified by a valid mind. If the basis, when I see a rope and I perceive that rope mistakenly to be a snake, well, I can use my eye consciousness to check, does it have snake skin? Does it perform the function of a snake? And if it doesn't, well, I can establish thereby it doesn't exist conventionally. Snake's gold is a little easier. What about value? Well, is it valuable or not? That depends on how people behave around it. Does it have a certain value? Do people use it in a particular way? And that may change. And so the questioner here also says, well, money sometimes loses its value. Absolutely true. So conventionally, therefore, circumstances have changed, and therefore it is no longer labeled as in like a certain value being given to it. And again, it's not just randomly decided. There are certain factors that need to be given. Then another aspect that came to mind is when we judge things as virtues and non-virtues, or positive and negative. Again, that is purely conventional, as is gold and as is a snake and everything else that exists. It exists conventionally, but there it becomes much more obvious that it's based on a personal judgment, in that what I like, if I like something related to that, I call something positive. If I don't like something, in relation to that, I call it negative. If what it creates, if it causes me suffering, if it causes me a situation that I don't like, based on that, I call it this, that, and the other, and I may do so incorrectly. I may actually be mistaken, and I could check if I believe that hatred gives me happiness. Just speaking my mind and being spiteful and resentful, that gives me happiness. Well, here I just need another type of mind and check. Do I really feel better? Do I really feel better when I'm spiteful, when I'm resentful? And check, does it help the situation and so forth. So I verify with another type of mind. I verify with regard to the results of my behavior. Does it bring me happiness or not? And the more mindful I am, the more I observe my own mind, using, again, my own mind as the basis, and then check, well, I can verify, is it true or not? With regard to love and compassion, if I believe those to be negative states of mind, well, in relation to how they make me feel, in that, usually the relation to how something makes me feel, I decide this is positive or negative, always in relation to something else. Does it have that basis? Does it make me feel a certain way? And then based on that, I label it positive or negative. If that is given, then that labeling is what's the word? That's verified. It can be verified. But of course, a lot of it is pure opinion. What I think is beautiful, another person may not think is beautiful. So it's in relation to what I like. It's beautiful in relation to what another person likes. It's not. And so, is it beautiful and ugly both? Well, yes. Well, yes. In relation to this person, it's beautiful. In relation to another person, it's ugly. And I can check again, is there a mind that considers this to be pretty? Well, yeah, if there is, if that's considered to be beautiful, then in relation to that, for that person, that's beautiful. It's similar to long and short. In relation to something longer, an object is short. In relation to something shorter, an object is long. But of course, saying it's virtues and non virtues is not so much a matter of opinion. But again, saying, if we define virtue and non virtue, the way it's usually defined is beneficial. Does it benefit humans or not? And again, we can check. Okay. So this was just a short explanation. Every case, it's so hard to give like a blanket kind of answer, just because every example needs to be looked at, needs to be analyzed specifically, as in, like, what is it? What is the basis for calling it this, that, and the other? And that basis, is it there or not? Can I verify its existence or not? Which is therefore the reason why we say we don't just create things. There's a consistency, there are some rules to it. Okay. And what I label, the kind of label I give to something, I do this based on a certain basis of imputation. And if that's given, I can say it exists conventionally, and if it's not there. All right, so you're welcome to continue with your questions. That may not be the end of it. Come up with examples. Possibly you can send me a message, and I'll try to address this. Unfortunately, there's not enough time to go into more explanation, and I also want to move on to conventional truth versus ultimate truth, which is different to conventionally existent and ultimately existent. This is an extra complication that some of you are already aware of. For some of you, this may be new. Anyway, it takes a while to get used to it, but it's not that difficult. So I'll just say it again. There's a difference between saying something exists conventionally and something is a conventional truth, or saying that something exists ultimately and something is an ultimate truth. There's a difference between them. All right. But first, before I explain the difference between them, let's look at the true truth. Because without an understanding of the true truth, it'll be hard to explain the difference I just mentioned. Now, if you go to the text, please, to verse 22, if we could maybe have it on the screen. Okay, great. Now, here there's an opponent. After all this analysis we had previously, so you remember, we analyzed our result in relation to its cause. What is the connection between our result and its cause? And again, I also mentioned this last time. One of the main principles in Buddhism is, of course, dependent arising. And ordinarily, when we analyze any type of object as to its existence, we take an object and its parts. We take an object and the basis of imputation, the basis based on which we label I and so forth. Usually that's what we analyze. So in the case of the person, the I, what is the relationship between the I and the parts of the I, the mind, the body? Okay, what is that relationship? Can I really find a mind here, an I here? Is there an inherent I? And if there's only a conventional I, how does it relate to the mind and body? This will come up later as part of a topic, well, in particular with regard to how the self exists. That's a huge topic that's also discussed in the 6th chapter. Now, here we're not so much concerned with a whole and its parts, but a whole, such as an effect, which has parts, of course, it's also a whole, but we don't look at it from the point of view of being a whole, um, whole as in like WHOLE, whole. We're looking at it having parts. We're not looking at it from that point of view, but from the point of view of its cause. Something created it. And the cause that created it, what is the relationship between it and its cause? Are they of one nature, as in inseparable? We've seen that's impossible, because otherwise the result must already exist at the time of the cause. Or are they totally separate? Are they inherently different? Which again, we've seen that doesn't make sense, because that would mean they're totally disconnected. And it wouldn't make sense that certain causes give rise to certain result, but other causes do not give rise to that result. That wouldn't make sense, because everything would be totally disconnected, and even darkness could come from light and so forth. Now, having given all that discussion, what we've learned is that there's no cause that gives rise to a result that is of the same nature. So they're not identical, but they're also not totally separate. So there must be a middle way, and that's what we're learning about here. However, before we get to understanding that difference, well, we come to the true truth in that an opponent, maybe there was really an opponent at the time when Chandrakirti wrote this text who kind of voiced this objection. Maybe it was just made up, there was no opponent, but it's probably a valid objection that someone may voice, that someone may express in this context. So what is this objection saying? What are you saying here? That things don't exist as inherently different, like cause and effect are not inherently different? Well, in the world, it appears that way. So here, worldly perspective, the perspective of ordinary people, which is grounded in its own views. It's grounded, it's got a basis in its own views. It's authoritative, or it's valid to people in this world. They believe that to be valid. That things, and this is just an opponent, that things come from what is other than themselves is perceived by people. So this opponent says, well, people perceive this, that things like an effect is inherently different from its cause. It's perceived by people. I mean, people know this. So what use is reasoning here in this context? I mean, in the sense, like, why are you trying to establish the opposite? You don't have to prove that a result is inherently different from its cause, because people already believe that, perceive that. And the opposite, you definitely can't say that they don't exist that way, which Chandrakirti tried to prove previously. Chandrakirti said, well, a result is not inherently different from its cause, but the world perceives it that way. Therefore, he says, other arising from something totally other, is established. Other arising is just the Tibetan term that's used here, just a short version, Shenke, as in like arising from something that's inherently other. That is established. And what need do we have of reasoning? Okay, so basically, what the opponent is saying, the world disagrees with you. The world disagrees with you. There's a seed, there's a sprout, and they seem to be totally different characteristics. So to us, they're inherently different. So all your reasoning doesn't bring any. First of all, if it were to be inherently different, You don't need to apply reasoning because everyone knows it. So if they already know, you don't need reasoning. We know the sun rises in the east, so no one needs to reason, right? You don't need to correct reason for that. Well, rises in the east or whatever, or the earth moves in a certain way so that the sun appears. Well, that's obvious to us. We don't need reasoning, the opponent says. On top of that, what you try to reason is that it's not the case. You're trying to say that it doesn't exist inherently, and I disagree. Okay, now what the opponent is getting at is ordinary perception, what the world accepts. What does the world accept? And in that context, now Chandrakirti says, well, with regard to that you're saying this contradicts worldly perception, we need to talk about the true truth. Okay, so he says in verse 23, all entities, whatever exists, bears dual natures. Whatever exists has two natures. Well, there's like in general, everything that exists has two natures. Let's put it that way. As obtained by correct or false views of them. So in relation to a correct view, there's a certain nature. In relation to a false view, there's another nature. Okay, so now these two views are explained. What is seen by perfect vision is the ultimate truth. So what is seen by a mind that is called perfect mind, correct mind, that is the ultimate truth. What is seen by a false mind is a conventional truth. That is what is taught. All right. Now, first of all, and there were questions also with regard to this, and I hope to answer all these questions, but I'm trying to take my time a little bit with it because I'm thinking if I create more of a context, it'll be hopefully self-explanatory. But first of all, one person asks here with regard to the true truth, well, two, why two? And how can you have two truths? You have one truth, right? You can only have one truth. How can you have two? All right. Well, why two? And the second aspect is, can you have more than one truth? No, actually you can't. The conventional truth is not a truth. It's called a truth, but it's not a truth. It's not an actual truth. Ultimate truth is an actual truth. Conventional truth is not a truth. It's just called a truth. All right, that's an important part. So that's important to remember. It's just called a truth. It's a truth in relation to a particular wrong mind. That's it. Now, one bit that's also difficult is calling it a truth. For us, well, in English, or I guess in Hebrew as well, in whichever language that you use, to say it's a truth. To say, for instance, emptiness is a truth. It sounds weird. We don't talk like that. I mean, usually it's like, it's almost like you need a whole sentence, you need a whole statement. We all suffer. That is a truth. Okay, that is a true statement. So, of course, here we hear about the Four Noble Truths. It seems like, are you kidding me? You got two truths and then you add four other ones. Well, here, actually, the actual truth is just the ultimate truth. The Four Noble Truth, the word truth here means something different. It's the same word in Tibetan. It's the same word in Sanskrit, I believe. However, it has a different meaning. When you say the Four Noble Truth, they're just saying it's valid. It makes sense. Makes sense. This is said to be the case as seen by Arya beings, by beings who've seen reality directly. For them, this is a reality. This is true. That's the meaning of the Four Noble Truth. But that's different. Here, the word truth, although it's the same word, it has a different meaning. It depends on context. Ultimate truth, conventional truth. If you take those two, whatever exists is either an ultimate truth or a conventional truth. So let go of your sense. This doesn't make sense. You can only say A is B. That is a truth. How can you say emptiness is a truth? How can you say, for instance, you may say a table is a conventional truth. It's not a truth. It's just a table. But again, it has to be explained, a conventional truth and ultimate truth. Ultimate truth, really the reason you use the word truth, it is a truth, is from the point of view of when this particular entity, this phenomenon, emptiness, appears to a mind that directly perceives it, okay, a mind that experiences emptiness, to that mind, emptiness exists the way it appears. There is no false appearance to the mind. The mind, to this mind, the mind that understands emptiness directly, that experiences emptiness, in the same way as you may experience, for instance, when you eat food, or when you perceive something with your eye consciousness, you have a direct experience of a sense object. In the same way, we can actually, through meditation, we can learn, we can generate a type of mind that perceives phenomena, that perceives emptiness directly. It, experiences emptiness just as it is. To that mind, there is no mistaken appearance. Conventional truth are conventional truth in the sense that they are false, that when they are directly perceived by a mind, and this is just why one is a truth and one is not a truth. This is really explaining that. A table or any other object, different to when we realize emptiness directly, which we can all do as non-Buddhas, we can all realize emptiness directly, different to realizing emptiness where there's no mistaken appearance, when we directly realize it. Conventional truth, when they appear to our mind, and we don't blame the objects here, we blame our own mind. It's due to our habitual, misperception of reality, misapprehension of reality, that automatically, whenever we perceive a table or a car or anything that is not emptiness, anything that is not the ultimate nature of phenomena, it always appears in a way in which it doesn't exist. Therefore, it's not a truth. It's false. It's only a conventional truth. It's only a conventional truth, which means it's only a truth for a wrong mind, for ignorance. A table for the mind that perceives the table to exist truly. For that mind, the table is a truth. It's really there. It really exists inherently, the way it appears to that mind. So from the perspective of that ignorance, from the perspective of a mind that holds the table to be truly existent, inherently existent, well, to that mind, the way this table appears to be inherently existent, it is inherently existent from the perspective of just that mind, right? Okay. Therefore, we say a table, a car, and so forth, they are conventional truth. Because from the perspective of a mind that misapprehends them, they exist truly. They exist inherently. But with emptiness, if so, even so, that's just the meaning of the word. But to get more towards the meaning, to understand the meaning, conventional truth, really what it means, strictly speaking, is that whenever anything that is not emptiness appears to a non-Buddha's mind, to a mind of a non-Buddha, like it's also in relation to us as sentient beings, any object that is not an ultimate truth, that is not emptiness. So I haven't mentioned this before. Ultimate truth is emptiness. Any emptiness, any lack of inherent existence of a table, lack of inherent existence of me, of you, all this, any type of lack of inherent existence or emptiness is called ultimate truth. And anything other than that, anything else that we accept to be which exists, I mean, that which exists, the existent things around us, all of them are that are not emptiness, they're conventional truth. So table, car, I, you, and so forth. Because they're conventional truth, because they're false in that they're like optical illusions. They exist, they appear one way and they exist in a different way. That is not true for emptiness. When we actually experience emptiness, the mind that experiences emptiness directly is not fooled, because emptiness will, that perception of emptiness, the mind cannot perceive it in any wrong way. That's why emptiness is true in the sense the way it appears is in accordance, the way it appears to a direct mind is in accordance with the way it exists. And for conventional truth, that's just not the case. Therefore, you have two truths. It's either one of those two. Either when something appears, it appears when it appears to a direct experiencing mind. When it appears to a direct experiencing mind, either it appears the way it exists or it doesn't. It's only two possibilities, which is why we say, therefore, that which belongs to the category that when it's perceived directly, it exists the way it appears. We call that an ultimate truth. And that which doesn't do that, we call a conventional truth. All right. And that is just, we have to learn about this, why this is the case. Why, when it comes to anything other than emptiness, these objects, when they appear to the mind, they always appear in a way in which they don't exist. If you take I, car, and so forth, whenever, and his Holiness mentions this all the time when he talks about quantum physics and in connection to quantum physics, that there is the appearance of an object. We're not saying the table doesn't exist. We don't say the car, I, and you, that we don't exist. We just say this characteristic of inherent existence that appears together with the appearance of I and car and so forth, that doesn't exist, which means I exist and you exist. But when I appear to my own mind, I appear as if inherently, concretely, solidly, independently existent. That characteristic, that's not realistic. I exist, but not in that way. You exist, but not in that way. That's an unrealistic appearance. And finding that an object doesn't exist in that way, that is the ultimate truth. Now, to say it slightly differently, to explain conventional truth and ultimate truth differently, that's another way of putting it. Conventional truth refers to everything that appears to us when we don't analyze reality. Everything that appears to us. And here we're saying, of course, we need to differentiate between things that actually exist and things that don't exist. But let's just not go into those things, and that will be explained in verse 24, 25. But without going into that, just let's take everything just on the basis of things that exist, based on what I said earlier, conventionally existent or not, whether it can be verified or not. Let's just take everything that exists. There are two categories, like I said, conventional truth and ultimate truth, explaining it slightly differently, not from the point of view of appearance, as I just did, but from another point of view. If I don't analyze, if I don't engage in what is called ultimate analysis, I'm not just saying any analysis, but ultimate analysis. What is ultimate analysis? When I say there's a table, ultimate analysis means I try to find what is this essence of a table. I'm trying to find a table that if I were to strip the table from the thought table, the idea table, the label table, if I were to strip it from that, still trying to find a table, okay, other than the merely labeled one, if I try to find something essentially there, that's when I engage in ultimate analysis. There's other analysis, of course. I can analyze, is this table big or small? Is this table useful or not? Does it fit into my living room or not? That's not ultimate analysis. That's analysis. That's conventional analysis. Okay, I'm just analyzing aspects of it. But in order to understand its ultimate nature, and let's not forget why we're doing this. We're doing this because, of course, not understanding its ultimate nature is the root cause for all our suffering. It's responsible for us not being able to love unconditionally and have unconditional compassion and having anger and so forth. That's why it's important to analyze, do things exist the way they appear to us? In order to find out, we engage in ultimate analysis. Ultimate analysis means, okay, is there really a table there? Can I find a table independent of me just labeling? Where's the table within its parts? And here I'm talking about the table that as it appears to me. As it appears to me, like how does it appear to me? The table doesn't appear to me just labeled. Like I said, a table appears, but the table appears to me as if inherently existent. And when I engage in ultimate analysis, that's when I'm checking whether such a table can be found. And the non-findability of that table is called emptiness. The non-findability, not being able to find that table, okay? Not being able to find. So what does the mind that realizes the emptiness of the table, what does it realize? When I say it realizes emptiness, well, what it finds is the non-findability of that table. It looks for the table among its parts somewhere, something there the way it appears to me. Not just a conventional table. That's not, to me, the conventional table doesn't appear just on its own. It appears mixed, inseparable from this sense that exists in and of itself inherently. There's really something there from the side of the object. That's what appears to me. And I'm looking for exactly that. And since it's not there, I don't find it. And not finding that non-findability, that absence of a characteristic that was never there, that is the emptiness. I find that non-findability, the lack of inherent existence. And that lack of inherent existence, that non-findability, that is the object. The object, when I look for something, when I engage in ultimate analysis, that's called the ultimate truth. And anything else that exists, that appears to me, and that I do not subject to ultimate analysis, that's conventional truth. Okay, everything that exists, just table, car, everything that does exist that is not that non-findability, as in like what I'm saying when I say I don't find the table, I'm not saying I don't find a conventionally existent table. What I'm saying is I don't find an inherently existent table. That's what I don't find. Okay, so the non-finding of an inherently existent table, that is the emptiness of the table. And what I'm left with is conventional table. That is a conventional truth. Oh gosh, I hear myself talk and I think, oh, I made it worse. I'm not sure I made it any clearer. In my mind, it was kind of clear before I started this class, or before I started, this explanation. I'm not sure I did you a favor with that. But just to summarize it, in other words, emptiness is an ultimate truth, and everything else that is not emptiness, that is not the emptiness of the table, of the car, and so forth, is called a conventional truth. All right? It's all that refers to the objects that appear to us on a daily basis. And we're not saying they don't exist. Of course they exist, but not with this additional characteristic which we wrongly give to them, which our mind, due to our habit, automatically imputes, if you like, wrongly imputes. In this case, it's you can wrongly impute. You don't have to always do it correctly. We wrongly impute a characteristic onto phenomena that they don't have. All right. Now, therefore, this is what Chandrakirti says. Therefore, we talk about true truth. True truth in the sense that whatever exists bears those dual natures. So if you take a table, the table itself is a conventional truth, and its own emptiness is its ultimate truth. The lack of an inherent table, the lack of an inherently existent table, that is the emptiness of the table, and that is its ultimate truth. So everything that exists, the phenomenon itself, if it's a conventional truth, okay, if it's a conventional truth itself, well, then it is a conventional truth, and then based on that, you have an ultimate truth, its own emptiness. I said the only exception is emptiness itself. If I take the emptiness of the table, that is not a conventional truth. But it also, so the table itself is, the emptiness of the table, that is an ultimate truth. But even that doesn't exist independently. It's also merely labeled, which means it doesn't exist inherently. Even emptiness itself. So you have the emptiness of emptiness, even the lack of inherent existence on the table. When you analyze that, when you search for some inherent emptiness, you can't find that either. It's also just labeled. And what I say, for some of you it's harder, for some of you less hard. This is really difficult. This is a really difficult idea, and it takes a long time. It's a whole process that you go through over possibly years if you have this interest. And trust me, it gets better. It gets easier. It's like every time you hear it, you think about it again. Yeah, you there are times when you feel like you take one step forwards and three backwards, definitely. But if you have an interest and you stick to it, it makes more and more sense. And the beauty of this is that it changes your mind in a good way. Now, I want to share something with you, um, because, well, these days I translate for someone called Yang Rinpoche. He's a wonderful Lama. And a question came up, and this is a very typical question that we face, that people in the West, oftentimes we as Westerners, we ask. And he gave an answer that His Holiness sometimes gives, and it's a beautiful answer. And I thought I want to share that with you. The question came from two participants of the teachings, and both of them said, well, Buddhism, it's all nice. It sounds great, but it all takes so much time. It's like countless eons here and, you know, billions of lifetime. And oh my God, I mean, I'm talking, like, how can we not feel discouraged? How can we not be fearful of what lies ahead? Right? I mean, valid, isn't it valid? Like, quick, one lifetime. Wouldn't that be great? I think we may be more motivated to do it, right? I mean, there are, of course, tantric practices, but we, of course, are not tantric. I mean, as beginners, we're not ready to practice tantra, so no way we'll do it. I mean, some of you, maybe some exceptions, but in general, we're all beginners, and therefore it just takes time. And what was his response? Well, he said, yeah, I get that. It takes a lot of time. Takes a lot of time. What is the alternative? You'd rather spend the next three countless eons, within samsara, going through all the ordinary suffering day by day, just keep on being angry and attached and just keep doing what you're doing, live the ordinary life for the next three countless eons. No, for the next 300 countless eons, because you're stuck in samsara. So what's the alternative? Is that a better alternative? That you should be fearful of. That's something that's really scary. Do I rather it takes me three countless eons to get out of it, or three countless eons to stick with it and even longer? Right? I mean, His Holiness has said it on a few occasions. He kind of said, well, what's the alternative? And what's important, and that's also what Rinpoche said, what His Holiness has said, the thing is that you get happier and happier as you go along. If you really engage in these practices, if you just simply apply Buddhist science on the mind, the sense of the concreteness of things, I, you, it's so concrete and good and bad, my friend, my enemy, it starts going away. It's a problem. Well, it's a problem because I label it a problem. If I label it a challenge, then I change it into, you see, things start loosening, and that doesn't mean you understand it, but just this understanding, things don't exist as they appear. So when a problem arises, wait a minute, yeah, it seems to be a real problem, unsolvable, like this knot in my heart or whatever it seems to be like, but it cannot be found. And right away, there's a lightness. You take situations with much more of a lightness. But you develop a kind of resilience, like whatever comes. It doesn't exist as concretely, even if you don't understand it. And so this is what Rinpoche said. This is what His Holiness usually says. What do you want? Spend the next three countless eons stuck in samsara the way you were stuck in it before? Yeah, well, then don't practice. It's up to you. You're your own master. Or for the next 3 countless eons, you make an effort and you get happier. It's not like you life sucks and you suffer until the last moment of a bodhisattva and then you're a Buddha and everything is no. It's a gradual process of moving away from first this feeling of loneliness and unhappiness. Slowly you move out of the worst kind of suffering. You become a little happier. You become a better person, a happier person. And slowly you move on and you become a bodhisattva. You become this greater and greater person. And that doesn't just mean that other people think you're greater and wonderful and find you inspiring. You yourself are at ease with yourself. You're okay with yourself. You can accept yourself. You're loving of yourself. Self compassion. You practice that, right? And so I see these people around me. I mean, in my own case, I'm stuck. I know I have a problem with self compassion. I beat myself up and stuff. I was like, wow, this is me on the BBC. Whoa, great. Um, but I see other people practicing the Dharma well and they change. There's so much change, feeling happier. And if I can say anything, I feel happier. So, however long it takes, it's worth it. But you have to stick to it. You have to stick to it. And especially with emptiness. With compassion, what you need to do is what we do in the beginning of this class. Familiarize yourself throughout this whole week, continuously doing it. Just do it. Just do it. Don't question too much. Just do it. Try to become, well, of course, reasoning and stuff. Of course, if you have the time and go through it, that's most effective. If you just push yourself and you force yourself, you're not going to get anywhere. But the point is, don't give up. It's a matter of familiarizing yourself with it. Here, it's less of a matter of familiarizing, it's more like going deeper and deeper and deeper, making your mind more flexible. Don't give up. That's all I can say. Well, it's standard sentences Holmes uses. Just don't give up. It's worth it. Okay. So sorry for that kind of pep talk, but I've bombarded you with, and I see there are 13 questions, I guess. Okay. Oh, there's okay, great. Could you explain today is different from yesterday's I self-compassion? Oh, wow. Okay, great. So there are quite a few questions, some in Hebrew I can't read. Um, Oh, right. Okay. So here, let me I just choose one question to now wrap it up. And before we can do our meditation, talking about ultimate truth, conventional truth. All right. Okay. So I've already said those everything other than emptiness is a conventional truth, and every type of emptiness of table, I, others, that is an ultimate truth. But I've also talked about being conventionally existent. That is different. Being conventionally existent means being merely labeled. Even emptiness is conventionally existent. Emptiness is not a conventional truth, but it exists conventionally. Everything exists conventionally, even emptiness. I'll stress this more again next time. You haven't had time to go into this today. I'll stress it more. Remember this much. Even emptiness is merely labeled. Even emptiness is merely labeled. Now, what happens when there are two groups? This question I pick, and the other ones, maybe they can be sent to me if you don't mind. Please, if maybe share, if you can, is this easy for you to do, to send those questions that are in the chat? Can you send
Yeah,
them to
yeah,
me?
I think they are sent privately, so you can just send them to me.
Ah, perfect.
I posted
Please.
my email on my phone, so anyone who sent questions, just send them to me, please.
Okay, great. Yeah, so if you could do that, that'd be great. But one question I'm picking here, what happens when there are two groups who coexist conventionally? One group believes that the death penalty is okay, and the other group believes the death penalty is not okay. Is it okay or not? Right? Okay, well, that's really difficult discussion. From a Buddhist point of view, no, it's not. Okay, let's just take the Buddhist view. The Buddhist view, why? Because it creates more suffering. Let's just leave it at that. We can discuss all this, but basically, I mean, anyway, sometimes here we just take the Buddhist view as in like, what is it that gives the greatest happiness to most people involved? right? We're looking for that which causes the greatest happiness. With regard to that, we say something is positive or negative. It's only in relation to that. As I've mentioned many times, if we all wanted to suffer, then being hateful and so forth would be good. But since we want to have a certain experience of peace, etc., therefore, issues such as the death penalty, well, it's complicated. But in general, if you take other issues, is it better to have a centralist government or a leftist or rightist government, or is it better to have something bizarre as everyone wearing blue sweaters or everyone wearing red sweaters? Just something where it's both okay in that case, wearing both red sweaters or blues. It's just a matter of opinion. Here we're talking about what creates the greatest suffering. What is, for instance, political views, left or right? Which party is more concerned with the environment, with the well being of most people involved, and so forth? Based on that, we can say it's good or bad. Death penalty. What is most beneficial for most people involved? For the person who dies, but also for the people who are left behind. Does it really do something with their grief? With the person who has died, and of course for the perpetrator, is it the best solution for so taking all that into consideration from a Buddhist point of view, assuming putting the person in prison is actually considered, and even lifelong in prison, that is considered better than taking this person's life. Also from the point of view of those people who have to put this person to death, the executioner and so forth. So that is just from the point of view of what we wish, from the point of view of wishing to bring greatest happiness to as many people as possible, from that point of view. Okay? So it's always in relation to that when it comes to virtues or not virtues. If you have further questions, you're welcome to ask, of course. And I'd like to now start with a meditation with the hope I haven't confused you too much. But anyway, we've got the chance to bring it into meditation. And what I said today, we'll go through it again um, through the analytical meditation. So let's start, as we usually do, with some breathing to let go of any tension, of any frustration because of possibly not understanding. Just let it go and return to this calm mind that's just mindful of the breath. Now, in order to accommodate the Buddhist view and the view of the world, the Buddha described two truth: ultimate truth and conventional truth. And whatever exists either belongs into the category of ultimate truth or conventional truth. There's no further possibility. start with the ultimate truth. Emptiness is an ultimate truth. The emptiness of the I, the emptiness of other, the emptiness of anything that exists is an ultimate truth. In other words, the lack of inherent existence of any phenomenon is an ultimate truth. While everything else, table, car, house, tree, everything other than emptiness is a conventional truth. The ultimate truth is considered to be a truth, while the conventional truth is not a truth. So, what does truth mean in this context? It means that when the object is experienced by a direct perceiver, it appears the way it exists. Which means that the emptiness of any phenomenon, when it's directly perceived by the mind, it does not appear to exist inherently, but it appears to lack inherent existence. Therefore, an emptiness is not deceptive. And thus called a truth. A conventional truth that is any phenomenon other than emptiness is merely called a truth. But in actuality, it's only from the perspective of a wrong consciousness, from the perspective of the mind that misperceives the table. From that perspective, the table is a truth. But it's not an actual truth because it's deceptive or false. And that whenever it appears to us, it appears in a way in which it can impossibly exist. It's impossible for it to exist inherently, yet it appears that way. Or to say it differently, an ultimate truth is what the mind perceives when it looks for the inherent existence of an object. So the mind that searches for an inherently existent table for some independent, concrete table. The non-findability of such a characteristic of existing concretely and independently. That is the ultimate truth of the table. The non-findability, the inherent existence of a table is an ultimate truth, and the ultimate truth of the table. Likewise, the non-findability, not being able to find an inherent I, that is the emptiness of the I, and therefore the ultimate truth of the I. And everything else that is not an object of this ultimate analysis, this non-findability, everything that is not that non-findability, the I, others, cars, etc., all those are conventional truth. The existent objects that appear when we do not engage in ultimate analysis. So now, how is this understanding helpful to us in our daily life? It's helpful in understanding I exist and you exist. Love and compassion exist. And suffering does too. Because they're conventional truth. But we're fooled by their appearances to our mind. Because they appear to exist inherently, independently. And this lack of inherent existence, that is their ultimate truth. So then, if things do not exist inherently, if the lack of inherent existence is the ultimate truth, how do they exist? They exist conventionally. As merely labeled. Which means that there's no concrete friend or enemy. No independent, inherent, good or bad person. And thus, no basis for attachment or hatred. Our negative emotions, envy, aversion, resentment, desirous attachment, and so forth. They only work, they only function with the fuel of the misapprehension of inherent existence. And it is understanding their ultimate truth. That enables us to let go of our attachment to an inherent I and utilize the power of our mind to now experience, without any limitation, unconditional love and compassion for ourselves and all other sentient beings. And now let's take a moment to focus on whatever conclusion we've come to. Allow this feeling to go deeper, sink deeper into our own mind by just focusing on that feeling. And let's then dedicate whatever positive potential we've accumulated here together. May this not get lost, but become a cause for our speedy enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. And at the same time affect those around us, and that may reduce their sufferings, especially those who are unwell. Like Annie Lobsang, may she continue to recover, and Tali Lubin, may she also quickly recover from her illness. And likewise, as described in Shantideva's dedication prayer, may all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. All right, so just to remind you, please watch this TED Talk. On top of it, consciously or in a focused manner, focus on self-compassion, self-love. And from there, again, as you usually do for the next week. And with the true truth, maybe it's been more confusing for others. You've already heard about it. There's nothing new. And I'll continue with the next verses, but also try to spend some time on what you've learned today so we can continue with the next verses next time. All right. And I wish you a nice week, peaceful, compassionate week. And I'll see you again next week.
Thank you,
Thank
Geshe.
you.
Okay.
Thank you, Venerable.
Dankeschön,
Thank
Geshe.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Donna.
תודה רבה.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good.